So, thank you, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for joining us on this Tuesday evening during dinner time. And we have quite a few people joining us. I'll continue to admit people as we continue um, this evening. And I'm going to share my screen. I have a short PowerPoint. Yeah, there. Oops, in the wrong way. That's not right. Well, I did practice this. There we go. So, welcome. And our meetings are each month, held on the fourth Tuesday of each month. Sometimes it varies if we have an in-person meeting, such as a picnic or chili supper or even a garden tour. So we're glad that you're here. Some upcoming events, like Rick and I would like to have an open garden this spring, and we're looking at the afternoons of April 18th and 19th. I know these are busy times. That's why we did it two different afternoons. More details to come, but you can always email me or text or call me. We'd love to have you come visit our rose garden and rocks and our roses. In the DFW area, there's a lot of plant sales going on. The Denton County Master Gardener Association is having theirs on April 25th at the North Texas Fairgrounds in Denton, Texas. You can also check out the other Master Gardener groups in Collin County, Denton, Dallas, and Tarrant County to see what oh, plant sales they may have planned, classes they may have planned, and any garden tours if they have them scheduled. I don't want to forget to mention the Heritage Rose Foundation Conference, which is May 1st through the 3rd in Tyler, Texas, and then it continues on in Shreveport, Louisiana. May 1st is an evening event in Tyler, and then May 2nd, the event is at the Rose Gardens in Tyler, and there's other events going on that day. I know if you have questions, you can always contact Pam or check out the Heritage Rose Foundation website. Sunday, we will have more speakers in Shreveport at the American Rose Center. So we're so grateful to have Dr. Malcolm Manor speak to us this evening. He came in kind of last minute, swooped in, and I appreciate it so much. As there was not a mix-up, there was a change in our schedule of a person that was scheduled. So Malcolm, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really looking forward to this talk. Um, and I'll exit out of that. Okay. I'm trying to do it too quick. I'll do a brief intro. Dr. Malcolm Manners is a distinguished professor, and he's retired from the Florida Southern College and in May of 2025. Is that correct?
Yes.
And he's dedicated over 4 decades to the field of horticulture. And his academic journey began as an undergraduate at Anderson College in Indiana, where he uh, uh, lives close to that area now. And there he earned his BA in chemistry and biology. He then later worked on his MS and Ph.D. degrees in horticultural science from the University of Florida, and he specialized in the flowering physiology of tropical plants, or excuse me, tropical fruits. Dr. Manor started teaching at Florida Southern College in 1981. Where were you in 1981? Focusing on fruit production, roses, and crop propagation techniques. His commitment to education extends beyond the classroom, and he's participated in numerous volunteer consulting missions to developing countries, aiming to improve crop production methods and alleviate poverty through education. Dr. Manners is also a trustee on the Heritage Rose Foundation board and has been recognized with a Great Rosarian of the World title for his work on rose mosaic virus disease and as an educator in rose culture. His dedication to preserving heirloom genetic resources in roses and his leadership in the field have made him a very respected figure in the citrus and horticultural science community. So we are very honored and very pleased to welcome to our online group this evening. So thank you. So if everyone can mute at this time, and at the end of Dr. Manner's talk, he'll take questions and make sure that everyone can see your board. I'll pass that off to you now.
Thank you, Sherry. So can you see me at this point? Okay, I'm going to try to share my screen here. This talk, I gave something similar a few years ago at the ARS Deep South District meeting. This is slightly modified from that. Let me get rid of some pictures here. Okay, it is kind of a hodgepodge, but it's something that occurred to me might be of interest to people, in that I think we all have a story about how we got into roses and who impressed us and mentored us along the way. And then also along with that, some great gardens often associated with those people. So this is kind of my thinking of that sort of thing. Who has influenced me to become a Rosarian? And then some of the gardens that I think if you ever are in those areas, you really need to visit. So the first one, the first several you probably have never heard of, but Verda Pence was my great aunt. She's my mother's aunt, and she lived up near Lake Erie in Pennsylvania, where they get lake effect snow. But she had not just a green thumb, but a green arm. I think she could make a broom handle, make roots and grow. I've never known anybody who was a better gardener than her. She had a greenhouse and a big flower garden, and she actually was a commercial florist using her own flowers. So she was a real inspiration to me very early in life. I remember when I was probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 years old, she gave me a potted marigold, and that was my first plant. So I credit Aunt Verda with being my inspiration to become a horticulturist. That picture was taken probably 30 years ago. She's been gone for quite a while. Then I went to Florida Southern to teach. And up until that point, I was very interested in plants. As Sherry said, I worked mainly with tropical fruit physiology, and I did not have a specific interest in roses. But I was hired by Dr. Rupert Pravat. And Dr. Pravat was kind of Mr. Rose for Central Florida. He was a horticultural judge with the ARS, and he was the district director of the Deep South District of the American Rose Society.
I can't see
And he
me.
was my boss.
No.
Somebody's not muted, if you would, please. And so he really is the one who got me interested. He invited me to go to a rose show. And while I was there, I smelled a rose in the old garden rose section that gave me a fragrance memory of my grandmother's garden. And that started an interest. I thought I need to grow some of those. So I did. And I've always grown mainly heritage roses, a few moderns, but mainly heritage roses. Well, there's Dr. Pravat. Sorry, I hadn't shown that yet, in the orange coat. He was a citrus person also, and so he always wore either orange or bright green, always. Then Eleanor Ramage, who was a member of the Lakeland Rose Society, which I joined, and she became kind of a mentor. She was also a judge in the ARS and a very good rose grower. Eleanor's 101 years old now, and I had lunch with her last Sunday, so she's still going strong. But she was always somebody I could go to ask questions if I had a question about some aspect of the roses I was growing, and she would always have a wise answer. So I realize you may not have heard of most of those folks, but now some that you probably have if you've been involved in old roses for very long. Ruth Knopp from Charleston, South Carolina, I met probably, I'm thinking in 1983 or 4, somewhere in there. It was at a rose conference at the Huntington in California. And I had heard about this Ruth Knopp, a great lady, expert on noisette roses, and I guess kind of, I won't say idolized her, but thought of her as a celebrity who was kind of unapproachable. Well, when we were introduced then in California, I was almost kind of afraid of this woman, but we ended up sitting side by side at a lecture that was being given. And it turned out the lecture really was pretty boring. I don't even remember what it was about. But Ruth leaned over to me and she said, "Let's go outside and play hooky. I'm tired of this." And I thought, wow, that's kind of interesting that she would do that right in the middle of the talk. But I got up and walked out with her, and we walked the gardens of the Huntington and took pictures and became friends. And we were buddies ever since until Ruth passed away. So this is Ruth. She really was a student of the noisette rose, which of course originated in Charleston and was really a leader in studying noisette roses. So at one time they had a garden in Hampton Park, which is right near the Citadel, where they planted large numbers of mainly found noisettes that had been found like in cemeteries and old homesteads all around that area. And we studied those for several years. And at Florida Southern, we did some DNA work on them. Everybody. And then in 2001, Ruth hosted the 9th International Heritage Rose Conference in Charleston, and it also emphasized the noisette roses. The results of that Hampton Park study were published in a book then. I'm not sure that's still available. It might be through the Heritage Rose Foundation, but in any case, that was a book just about that study specifically. And then Ruth was named Great Rosarian of the World in 2011, very deserved. My next people then are Mike and Jean Shoup, former owners of the Antique Rose Emporium. And I met them also in the mid 80s. And there they are with Ruth. And I forget where we met. I think it might also have been at the Huntington. But then when Mike started having his fall festivals at Antique Rose Emporium, he invited me to come and speak. And I stayed in their home and got to be good friends of theirs. This is in the Trinity Church Cemetery in Harlem, New York, with Stephen Scaniello. This was at Lakeland. He came and spoke to our group and at his nursery. And we traveled one time with Nancy Coleman to South Africa. And this is in Namakwa National Park with their wildflower display. Well, Mike and Jean inspired me to meet and get to know some more of these people that I consider great Rosarians. So the next ones on my list are Gwen and Gabriel, but his nickname was Javi. For a long time, I thought it was Harvey, but it's G-A-W-I in Afrikaans. So Javi Fagan from South Africa. That first time that I went to the Shoups and stayed with them, Mike had on their coffee table this book by Gwen Fagan, Roses at the Cape of Good Hope. If you don't have that book, you probably should. It's a wonderful book. And Gwen authored it, describing the many types of roses that were known to be growing in the Cape Town area. And then something I think unique to that book, her husband, Javi, who, by the way, he's gone now, was a great architect. He's sometimes been called the Frank Lloyd Wright of South Africa. And he took the photographs for the book. And if you open that book up and look at one of those pictures and you pick a stem of the flowers of that variety, he had the picture printed so it's exactly the size and shape that you would expect of that plant. So it's really good for comparison. So I said Javi was an architect and he needed a landscape architect. Well, Gwen was a medical doctor, and but she decided she would become the landscape architect. So she went back to grad school, and after being an MD for several years, she earned a Ph.D. in landscape architecture and then worked with the company then for the rest of her working life. the way I got to know them, I was going to go in 1995 to a citrus conference in South Africa. I had seen that book at the Shoop's house, didn't know anything else about roses in South Africa, and didn't know any other people who were interested in roses in South Africa. And I wanted to see some gardens while I was there. So I sent this lady a note asking if she could suggest some gardens to visit, thinking, oh, she'll never answer me. She's a famous person and hasn't a clue who I am and couldn't care less. But she wrote me a letter back and she said, yeah, and I should say, one of the things that Afrikaners do, they order you to do things in a very nice way. And you might take offense at it, but they don't mean offense. They're inviting. So she said, you will be adding 3 days to your trip, and you will be staying here at the house with Javi and me, and I will be showing you the roses of South Africa. And that's what she did. It was a remarkable thing. I stayed in DS, which is their house that he designed, which is compared often to Frank Lloyd Wright's Waterfall House. And we drove to the National Palace in Cape Town. Mandela was newly the president at that time. And we walked in the back gate into the garden and just started looking at the roses. And I thought, this is a fairly new president in a very racially charged situation. Are we going to be shot walking in here or something? And I said, Gwen, are we even allowed to be in here? She said, well, I certainly hope so. I designed the garden for the man. And she was right. Nobody bothered her. It was a good garden. So anyway, that was an interesting thing. And I've been back to see them multiple times and have seen them also various places around the world. This is Gwen with her rose. This was, I forget who the breeder was, but the rose is Gwen Fagan. That's my sister, Rosemary, in the background. One of the things that Gwen did was restore old estates from the Dutch colonial days. And one of those is Boschendal in the wine district. So this is the old Dutch house, and Javi restored the house to its original condition. And then Gwen restored the gardens where she could. She found roses and other plants that were known to have been grown there and then replaced them. And really, she did that with a lot of those old estates and really did a nice job with them. I was there at the wrong time for peak bloom, so the pictures are not beautiful, but very good garden. And then there is also a Muslim cemetery near Cape Town that Gwen did all of the landscaping for, mostly with roses, although she always uses companion plants as well. As I said, this is about Great Rosarians and Great Gardens. So while we're in Cape Town, let's visit Kirstenbosch Botanic Garden. I think of the gardens I've been to around the world, and there are a lot of them, this may be my second or third favorite of all gardens. It's not a rose garden. It has no roses at all. It does strictly the native plants of Southern Africa, not just South Africa, but the other Southern countries. And it's just an astonishing garden. It's on the backside of Table Mountain, and it goes acres and acres, and it's a wonderful place to explore. They have proteas, protea family, aloes. Just a great garden. If you're ever in the Cape Town area, you really must see Kirstenbosch. Give it at least half a day. Well, Peter and Margaret Harkness, I also met through Mike Shoop. Mike had Peter over 1 year to speak at his fall festival. And we played the infamous Rose Alphabet game, and I got to know Peter. And so then I think it was 1996, my parents and I were planning a vacation in Great Britain, and we wanted to see the Chelsea Flower Show. And I had been studying up on that and realized that it's very difficult to get tickets to the Chelsea show. And so I wrote to Peter and asked if he had suggestions. And he said, we can work on that. But he was kind of procrastinating. And I thought he's not going to manage to get us tickets because he wasn't saying much about it. But then he kind of like Gwen, he wrote and he said, well, why don't you stay with us for a few days? And still, he didn't say we were going to the show. So we went and stayed with them. And still, he didn't say if he had tickets. I think I asked him if he had tickets, and he said not to worry. Well, on the morning of whatever day it was that we were going to go to the show, he came out not with tickets, but with name badges saying that we were employees of R. Harkness and Son Nurseries. And he said, now I'm hiring you for the day. I'm not paying you any money, but I am getting you free entry into Chelsea. And you're not to wait in the queue at the front with all of the public. You're to go in the back gate as an exhibitor. And so you'll be in there before it opens to the public. And your one assignment as my employee is to go around the gardens or around the show and see as many exhibits as you can and take lots of pictures. And then you'll be reporting to me what you saw that evening. So that was a wonderful event. And he was really pleased that he had planned that for us. It was great fun. This is in their one of their breeding greenhouses. Peter was also named a Great Rosarian of the World in 2005. Lisbeth and Neil Cooper were from Bermuda, and in the Bermuda Rose Society. I believe Lisbeth was a former president of the Bermuda Rose Society. And I went there for a World Federation of Rose Societies meeting in 1987. They had a regional meeting, and there was an ice storm in Atlanta where I transferred planes. And so I made it to Bermuda, but my luggage did not. And it got stuck in Atlanta then for the next 5 days before I finally got my luggage. Well, I was to speak the following day, and I was just there in blue jeans and a t-shirt and sneakers. And this was a very dressy occasion where they were having their meeting. So Lisbeth and Neil said, well, you look like you're about the size of our son. So they loaned me a wardrobe, and everything but the blazer. And Charles Walker loaned me his sport coat. And so when I got up to speak, I said, well, I'm entirely in borrowed clothing here, which I got a good laugh from the crowd to start with. But we've also been friends ever since. They've both passed away now, but have visited them numerous times. And they were really promoters of the Bermuda Rose Society and the Bermuda Mystery Roses, as they're called. This is Lisbeth with Elizabeth Carswell. If you ever visit Bermuda, you should certainly see Waterville. That is the Bermuda Rose Society's display garden at Waterville, which is a National Trust property. And they have all of their so-called mystery roses, as well as many other roses as they know are being grown in Bermuda that they can get. So it's a great place for people who are new to roses in Bermuda to go and look and see what varieties they like, see how they're doing. And they really use it as an educational thing. And they have volunteers in the society that go and work in that garden every week or two. Well, some of you will have known Betty Vickers. She's also gone. A lot of these people have passed, but Betty was a great friend for many years. That's her second from the right in the back with the glasses. And this was at Mike Shoup's. You probably know a number of those people if you've been involved in roses in Texas very long. And there she is in the middle. Betty was a trustee of the Heritage Rose Foundation for many years. She served as secretary of the foundation. This, I think, I don't know, this is a trip somewhere, probably France. Yeah, this is at Bagatelle. We were judging the rose trials at Bagatelle. Betty also traveled with my sister and I to South Africa one year, just as tourists. Well, Betty and Stephen Scaniello in 2009 were in New York looking for the graves of famous old Rosarians. And in the Trinity Church Cemetery in Harlem, they found the grave of George Folliot Harrison, the man who introduced Harrison's yellow rose. They had with them that day a photographer from the New York Times who wrote an article and published it in the Times about that visit. And Scott Stringer was the president of the borough of Manhattan at the time, and he saw the article and got the idea of beautifying Harlem and other parts of northern Manhattan with what he called the Heritage Rose District of New York. And so Betty was very instrumental in starting that project along with Stephen Scaniello. And they asked us at Florida Southern to produce plants and also provide student labor to plant and care for those roses. So for many years, up until the time of COVID, we took a group of students every year in the spring. We rooted a bunch of roses. Numerous old rose nurseries donated plants and really beautified a lot of parts of Harlem. And many of those gardens are still there. We, of course, didn't go during the COVID era. We've been back there once since. And then I retired this last year. So I'm hoping the college will continue that project. I know they're not going this year, but Betty was always there. She sometimes bought the hotel rooms for my kids, which was really nice. And we just kind of play mom to the group. We also often did workshops at those meetings for neighborhood kids, teaching them how to care for new gardens or how to propagate plants. So there's kind of a joke among horticulturists, maybe you know it, that if you don't know anything else about plants, remember that the green side goes up. Well, we had a bunch of kindergarten kids from the neighborhood that were helping us plant flowers. And somebody made the mistake of saying, okay, now go and plant the flowers. So this child literally did that. She planted the flowers. This is my first group that went to work in the Harlem Rose Gardens. These are the plants we packed up. I said to each student that they were taking one check bag and one carry-on bag. And the check bag was to be filled with rose bushes, so don't plan to use it. And that's how we got all of our roses up there. And we did that year after year. This is at the Harriet Tubman Memorial. We had groups of neighborhood kids there to help, and we planted roses from up until Civil War era. This is Stephen Scaniello working with kids. Some of my students planting. This is at City College of New York. Planted a rose garden there. This was several years later. We're back pruning it. And this is Hamilton Grange National Memorial, where Alexander Hamilton lived. The house is the original. It was actually on a different lot, and they moved the house. But this is now a national memorial. And Hamilton was he was kind of an amateur gardener and a designer, and he kind of as a hobby would draw out designs of various gardens, most of which he never got around to planting. And so Stephen Scaniello found a plan for a rose garden for in front of the house. And here we are actually planting the garden that Hamilton designed in the 1700s, but had never planted. And we used old roses that would have been appropriate, some of which we know that he did grow. And then we went back in future years and we pruned those same roses. There's Betty, that she was becoming ill at that time and really didn't do much working with us, but she would always come out and talk. And then here's the garden in bloom one June when I was there. Those are musk roses and some species roses. I think the white you're seeing there is mainly the musk rose. This is the Morris Jumel Mansion, which is also up in the north end of Manhattan. And we planted a lot of roses in that garden as well, and then maintained them over the years. Another pruning date. This is at the Hamilton Grange again. The Church of the Intercession is on the property of the Trinity Church Cemetery. If you're ever in New York, it's at 155th and Broadway. And in the Garth, which is the quadrangle in the interior of the church, they had this garden. Unfortunately, their newest caretaker has removed the roses from it. I'm not sure why, but it was a wonderful little garden. And this is actually Harrison's grave. They thought about putting Harrison's yellow on it, and then they realized it would become so vigorous you wouldn't be able to see the tombstone anymore. So instead, they put another found rose called Greenmount Red there. It also is almost too big. And the way I'm looking there with the camera, just off to the right of the picture and over the wall, they had a big Harrison's yellow that draped down over to the sidewalk on Broadway and really beautified that area. Another group planting more roses in that same cemetery, a different year. And here's the cemetery in bloom in June. This was teaching little kids how to propagate roses in soft drink bottles. So my next group of people then are Viru and Girija Viraragavan from India. Viru bred roses really with a different dream than I think most rose breeders had. He was working with the idea of Indian growers, and so he wanted roses that would do well in hot, humid conditions. And for us in Florida, that sounds familiar, and probably for some of you in Texas, that sounds familiar. So Gene Waring encouraged me to try growing some of their roses and see how well they did. And we ended up with a collection of, I don't know, I think 15 or so of Viru's roses, most of which really do well for us in Florida. And then in in 2000, in January, right before they shut everything down for COVID, the World Federation of Rose Societies had a regional meeting in Kolkata, India. And Girija managed to get me invited to go as a speaker. So I had the privilege of going there. And this was at the 250th uh, 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 celebration. That says bicentennial, but I think it's 250th of the Agro-Horticultural Society of India, along with this World Federation meeting. This is a show rather than a garden. It's in a botanic garden, but it's the strangest rose show I've ever seen and just fascinating. I don't know why other people don't do it. They tend to show their roses in these pots. And going to the rose show, you bring the whole bush. I don't even know how you transport something like that. I don't know how you time it so that every flower on the bush is open perfectly for judging day, but they're obviously experts at it. And it was a fascinating meeting. They have a lot of other things in this flower show as well. But that year they were specializing in roses because of the World Federation being there. And then across town is the Kolkata Botanic Garden. And they had planted a new rose garden in memory of EKJ Amal, who was the first woman botanist in India and the founder of or reorganizer of the Botanical Society of India. And so this is in that garden. This is a huge rose garden. I believe it has over 20,000 plants. I could be wrong about that, but it's an astonishing number. They're planting a rose in the middle that was bred by Viru and named for Professor Amal. But this is how the garden's laid out. Each of those beds has a single variety, and it just goes on and on. This was in 2000. I have asked Girija if she has any pictures of it since it's mature, because I don't have any taken since then, but I think it must be an amazing garden at this point. By the way, I managed to fly home from that meeting, and just days later, they started stopping everybody from travel due to COVID. So some gardens not associated with a specific person, but certainly worth a visit. If you ever get to Scotland, Crathis Castle is an astonishing place. It's near Aberdeen. It's now a National Trust property, so no one lives there. But it has these extensive gardens around it that are full of all kinds of annuals and perennials and a lot of roses. That's my mother. This was her favorite garden in the world. It's set up as a series of rooms. On the far left there, you can see a yew hedge. Some of those yew trees are over 300 years old. And if you walk down that tunnel of yew trees, there are doorways on the sides. And as you turn in each doorway, you're in a new, different garden. I took college students there. There you can see the walkway. And they didn't want to leave. They weren't horticulture students at all. And I thought they might get bored looking at this garden, but they loved it. They said it's like Alice in Wonderland, and they wanted to stay longer. And then at Kew, in a suburb of London, is the Royal Botanic Garden, which also it's a great botanic garden, but it also has a good rose collection. It has a modern section and an antique rose collection. This is their arbor in the orders beds. And when we were developing the garden for Florida Southern, I said I wanted an arbor that would remind us of this one. Ours, of course, couldn't be this big, but when Stephen Scaniello designed our garden, he did put in an arbor very much like this. This is the old rose section. And then in the southwest of England is Modestfont Abbey near Winchester. And I would rate this as my favorite rose garden in the world. It was developed by Graham Stewart Thomas, and then after him, David Stone took over, and really an amazing rose garden. They have what they call the modest font look, where they have mostly roses, but then they interplant them with things of various height. And they really like foxgloves and lupins and daylilies and peonies and just a lot of other things, plants that come in blue and purple shades that the roses tend not to. And as a National Trust property, it is open to the public. You may know that Graham Stewart Thomas was the one who rediscovered the true musk rose, Rosa moschata. So here it is growing on that wall, planted by Thomas himself. After I took that picture, they lost that plant, but they had others propagated, so they've replaced it. But they can't say it's the original one that Thomas planted anymore. And then in 2023, the World Federation of Rose Societies had their Heritage Rose Conference in Belgium. And on one of the tours, we visited Landhaus Ettenbühl, which is in Hertingen, Germany, right near the Swiss border, kind of across the border from Bern. And just an amazing garden. I had never heard of it, but John Scarman is an Englishman who moved there and designed that garden in the style of traditional English cottage garden type design. And it's quite an amazing place. It's many, many acres. You could easily spend 4 or 5 hours there without repeating any of the various walkways. They have formal beds and they have informal beds. A lot of them have interplantings with other things, and then some are solid roses. It's really a fascinating place and very well done. Some of the gardens are kind of color coded. So this was a blue and white garden. On that same meeting, another tour we took was of Hex Castle in here's Belgium. I had heard of Hex for many years, and always wanted to see it. It was given this award by the World Federation for its garden in 1998. Another garden of many, many acres, and odd in the sense that it mixes roses with things that you wouldn't normally mix with roses. So they'll have vegetable gardens and a patch of blackberries or raspberries, just kind of a very well-designed hodgepodge of things. And it works. It really is a nice garden. I love moss roses, and they had a lot of them. I'm sorry I don't know the names of a lot of these roses. Well, my last person to mention is Stephen Scaniello. I said here, oops, I almost missed a Rosarian, but this is a good place to put Stephen. Stephen, as you may know, was president until recently of the Heritage Rose Foundation, also the curator of the Peggy Rockefeller Rose Garden at the New York Botanic Garden and several other gardens. And so Stephen, along with Betty Vickers, was a real power behind the development of that New York Heritage Rose Garden. So he was always there when we took students. And then we went after COVID, before we went back to Harlem, we went 1 year to the Remember Me Rose Garden in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, which memorializes the families of Flight 93 that went down in Pennsylvania on 9/11. So these are some of my boys working with Stephen in that garden. In a different year in Harlem, we worked with a group of high school students planting their study garden. They had a roof garden on the top of their high school. And then this is in the Trinity Church Cemetery, a different group of students when we were planting and working with roses for the New York Heritage Rose District. If you know Stephen, you probably have seen or heard of his famous auctions where he auctions things off at rose meetings, and is quite a good auctioneer. This was judging at Bagatelle in just outside Paris. So some of the gardens that Stephen has had a great influence on. One is New York Botanic Gardens Peggy Rockefeller Rose Garden. This is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, rose garden in the US, I believe. Mostly modern roses, although he does have sections of heritage roses. And again, very nicely done. They have a lot of volunteers that help, but it's a huge job to keep that garden going well. And they have it in perfect condition at flowering time. And then at the Brooklyn Botanic Gardens, Cranford Rose Gardens, Stephen was the curator there before he went to the New York Botanic Garden. So this is the Cranford Garden. Not as big as the Peggy Rockefeller, but another very nicely done rose garden. And then the third garden that Stephen has been heavily involved with is the Elizabeth Park Rose Garden in Hartford, Connecticut, which is the oldest public rose garden in the United States. And Stephen did a lot to refurbish that garden. It was going kind of seedy, and he's brought it back to its former glory. It has a lot of ramblers on these big arches, Dorothy Perkins and her relatives. And then again, modern roses and old roses in various places. They have one area that's dedicated specifically as a heritage rose garden. And so they've done a lot of planting of antique varieties that had not been there before. And again, tried to bring back some of the ones that they had there. They do have a problem in that garden with rose rosette, so it's are always having to replace roses. Well, then we come to Florida Southern's garden, my garden, until I retired. And Stephen was the designer of that garden. We brought him to campus, and he stood on that spot right there and looked. We're looking north as the camera is looking here. As he says, so north of us, we have kind of an ugly parking lot. And east of us, we have Frank Lloyd Wright. And south of us, we have an out-of-place Renaissance Italian garden. And to the west, we have a building that looks like it should be a state penitentiary. And you want me to design a garden that makes all those come together? I said, yes, that's right. And he said, okay, we can do that. So he designed the garden, and it really has been a highlight of the Florida Southern campus. There you can see the arbor that he designed to resemble the one at Kew. But if you notice that kind of turquoise color of the metalwork, when you have the green of rose leaves over that, that matches the verdigris of the corroded copper on Frank Lloyd Wright's buildings. So it blends in very nicely color-wise with Frank Lloyd Wright. The arches, he got that idea from the Rosary de l'Aie near Paris, and also the Royal Abbey of Chailly in northeastern France, where we had a Heritage Rose Foundation meeting one time. And the pink there is Norma Hall. The white is the Bermuda Bistri Rose, Brightside Cream. So Ruth's Rose Garden has about 300 roses in it, a little over 200 varieties. That's Dortmund. I was back there last weekend helping them prune, and they're maintaining it very nicely, even though I'm not there anymore, and I was glad to see that. If you ever want to visit that garden, Florida Southern's in Lakeland, Florida, and probably the best time to see the garden at its peak would be the first 2 weeks in April, most years. So that's my presentation. I would be happy to talk to you some more if you have any questions or comments, whatever.
Everyone can unmute at this time. Thank you, Malcolm. That was awesome. I was taking notes. Does anyone have any
Very cool.
questions?
I
Does
don't
anyone
know if
have
I
any?
have a question, but man, how awesome to see all those gardens all over the world. Thanks for sharing. I loved it. It was great, Malcolm.
Yes.
Thank you.
One of the great perks of working at Florida Southern all those years was I got to travel. So that was great fun.
Yeah.
I've heard of so many of these Rosarians, and so now I just have one degree of separation, right? We all do now. So, you know, wonderful to hear your first person accounts of meeting them and being in gardens with them. So thank you very much.
I have a non-rose question for you, Malcolm. Why are all the street trees that are using oranges, why are they always sour oranges and not edible?
I think it's traditional because sour orange is a little more cold hardy than a regular orange by a few degrees. So if you're in an area that gets freezes, that's important. Depending on your soil, they have a much stronger root system. Sweet oranges are almost always grafted to something else, often sour orange. But you can grow sour orange from seed because it has a very good root system. And then, assuming you're not going to eat them, it makes a really pretty fruit because they turn bright orange against that dark foliage, which in California, a sweet orange would do that too. But in a place like Florida where we have humidity, the sweet oranges almost always have a green cheek to them.
Interesting, because in Spain, you know, you see all these orange trees and you just have to try one. And of course, you wish you hadn't. And I was just curious why they couldn't be edible.
Well, they make good marmalade. And the juice makes a great substitute for key lime pie juice.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you.
Malcolm, that was a great trip down memory lane for Gene and I.
Well, good. I'm glad you were here. I'm glad I didn't say anything bad about you, Mike.
Well, we were talking to ourselves, and we were mentioning all the funny events that happened that you couldn't talk about. So
that's right.
But just a great thing. It's amazing how the rose has brought, you know, so many people together, and you are a master at tying it all together, and it's nice to see you still involved. It's great.
Thank you.
So, Mike,
I'm on a new adventure now in Indiana. I'm planting gallicas and albas and moss roses.
Oh, you poor thing.
And peonies.
You know, we still are enjoying our teas and chinas and noisettes. Boy, are they pretty. And they're pretty right now.
Well, wonderful.
Well, Mike, it sounds like you and Gene have some comments and some color commentary that can be our next talk.
Okay. It might be real color.
I have a question for you, Malcolm, and also a comment. I also have been to the Kirstenbosch, I don't know if I'm saying it right, garden. And just as a funny note, I was there with a friend of mine who was my boss's wife at the time. And she had come into the office that morning and said, I'm taking Holly. We're going on a garden tour and you guys can't say anything about it. She's going. And so off she kidnapped me and off we went on this garden tour. And that's where we went. And I'm on call 24/7 and I had to have my phone with me all the time. And so we're having fun and running around looking at, you know, the little footbridges and all the different things there. And we get back to the entrance after having been there for about 3 hours. And I go, you know, it's really weird. I haven't gotten a phone call this whole time. And I reach into my purse for my phone and it wasn't there. And I was like, oh my God. And this was about 12 or 13 years ago. And so we had to backtrack our steps and I had dropped it into the creek on one of the footbridges. And so I found it, but it was dead. But the question I wanted to ask you was, I went to the Great Rosarians of the World conference where they were honoring Ruth. And I had the great fortune to meet her and to hear her talk there. And I took notes, and I remembered one thing that she had mentioned, and that was to never use cedar as a mulch, because it would eventually kill your roses. But here in Central Texas, where cedar is abundant, I've come across a lot of people that use cedar, and I'm really shocked by that, because I took what she said to heart, and I would trust her more than I would trust, just someone saying, oh yeah, I use cedar on my roses. So I'd love to know what you think about using cedar as a mulch on your roses.
I had not heard that from Ruth, and actually I'm using cedar on my roses. Now I wonder, did I make a mistake? But one thing I would say is that cedar is kind of a generic term. There are several species of juniperus, that get called cedars. And then there's also the genus Cedrus, which is true cedar. And so I wonder if one or more of those is a problem and the others are not. And just in American English, we happen to call them all cedar. I don't really know the answer to your question, though.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I think initially cedar bark, when it's young and fresh, has a little bit of toxicity, but as it ages, like any true bark, will compost and be okay. But as we would indicate for mulches, the more diverse, the better. If
Yeah.
you can get other things, it's just like Mother Nature. You just want to kind of repeat what she's doing, but I mean, that's been my finding. We have cedar down here. We don't use it when it's fresh, but if it's composted or has sat for a year, it certainly is fine.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, thank you.
And I'm assuming, Mike, that what you're calling cedar is a juniper species, right?
It's Juniperus ashii. It's
Yeah.
our native cedar. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this was great, Malcolm, and just loved it.
Well, thank you.
I have
Yes, thank you very much.
Well, I have a general pruning question for those that are attending, and a refresher. As some of us are finishing up our pruning, and in the South, I hear different things, and I'm gonna write. I always take notes. But when we prune, I'm a pretty heavy pruner. But which of our heritage roses don't take to a severe prune? I know you can prune back hybrid teas, no problem. But the Chinas and the teas, are they? I thought it was one of them that didn't care to be pruned back that hard.
The true teas are probably the pickiest. I would never prune a tea hard in the summer at all, or anytime it's hot. And in cool weather, we do prune them, but we leave them quite a bit bigger than we do our other roses. So in Florida Southern's garden last weekend, we were probably leaving the teas maybe 3.5 to 4 feet tall, and we were cutting other things down to 1 foot.
Like this would be our cat. I want her to get just giant,
The Chinas, on the other hand, couldn't care less. You can mow them off at any height you want, and they'll come right back. The only other thing that I wouldn't prune too hard, of course, would be something that's a climber, especially if it blooms on old wood. But of the shrubby roses, the teas are the only ones that I really am really careful about not pruning them too small.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Does anyone else have any rose care questions or questions about Malcolm's travels?
I have a question. Oh, hello.
I see a question from Teddy Mower about pruning of spinosas.
Oh, I see that.
Yeah.
Teddy realized that I've only been in Indiana for about how long now? 7 months. So I've never pruned a spinosissima here. And in Florida, the only one we grew was Stanwell perpetual, because that's the only one that bloomed ever. But it's a very good rose in even the hottest part of the South. And for it, we pruned it pretty severely. Now, it is a repeater, so if it were a once bloomer, I would think you'd want to treat it like you do most once bloomers, where you let them flower, don't do any pruning in the spring, let them flower. And then after they're done flowering, do whatever pruning you're going to do. So they have time then to set buds for the next year. But you wouldn't want to cut off the old growth in the spring. You're removing potential flowers when you do that. I'm kind of talking off the top of my head here as I say I've not done that with Spinosissima, but that would make sense just from the way they grow.
Okay, Natalie, did you have a question?
Yes, I just put it in the chat. Thank you again for this. It was really cool to see all the different roses and gardens you visited. I was curious if you had any places that are still on your rose garden travel bucket list.
My sister and I visited Australia and the South Island of New Zealand in September, which is totally the wrong time of year for roses. So I would like to go back and see roses there. We were there for high wildflower season, but just a rose flower here and there. So that's one place I would like to return to. I'd like to see Sangerhausen in Germany, the very famous rose collection, and I've never been there. I guess those would be the major ones.
Sounds cool. Thank you. I don't know if you've heard of this one, but I think the Rose of Hildesheim, and I forget where it is in Germany, but it's supposedly the oldest rose in the world, like 1,000 years old.
Yeah, I've heard of that one too. I've never seen it. That would be interesting.
Yeah. Well, cool. Thank you.
All right, there's a few more comments on there. And Maureen, do you have any questions? Anyone? I know Andy had to leave at 8 o'clock, but thank you everyone for attending and finding that link and getting on here and joining us. Appreciate your attendance, and thank you so much, Malcolm. I love your presentation. That was awesome.
Oh, you're welcome. It was great fun.
And everyone can visit Malcolm and become friends with a world famous Rosarian at the Heritage Rose Foundation conference, right? Right there, Pam? Just kidding.
Yes.
But the nice thing about conferences, which all these Rosarians you have met at conferences, I mean, is when we're able to gather as a group and enjoy gardens and enjoy, personal stories from and getting together in small groups or from, join each other in person is really, really cool. And it's in Texas. So that's, it's good for, I see all these Texans on here. So it's good for, and it'll be a fun place to visit. I guess I just saw that David Austin did an installation at the Tyler Rose Gardens too. Did you see that on anyone else see that on Facebook?
Yes.
So that will be interesting to see. So anyway, we could do a show of
Very
hands.
good.
Who's going? I'm going. Yay. Okay.
Yay. Quite a few are going.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think good percentage of this group is going. But not all of it, so there's still some room. Thank you, Malcolm. I can't wait to see you in Tyler.
That'll be fun.
I'm going to go to New York to work in the cemetery the end of March. So I'm going to go up there and see whatever Shauna's got going.
Good.
And hopefully
Good.
see Stephen.
Yeah, hope so.
Yeah. Bye.
All right. Well, good night, everyone. And thank you again.
Thank you, Malcolm. It was wonderful.
Thanks.